So if you're an entrepreneur or an entrepreneur wannabe, what I would say is you would have to cultivate two things to be successful. And those two things are resilience at the bottom and humility at the top. And you have to be ready to ride those two waves and persevere. And if you can do that, you can be both happy and successful in your career and also happy and successful in your life.
This is Pete Moore on Halo Talks NYC. I have the pleasure of having my good friend Denise DeBaun here from DeBaun Development. She is going to educate our listeners on what it takes to build a brand and a product in the skincare space. She's got a lot of experience and has worked with a number of our clients, and we're looking to work on a couple of ventures together. So I want everyone to understand what it takes, and it's not as easy as it might appear when you go onto the shelf and pick out a skincare bottle. A lot's gone into the work behind it. So Denise, welcome to the show.
It's nice to be here, Pete. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. So why don't you talk about your background, where you grew up, where you went to school, where you started, because you've gotten all the stripes. If you were a soldier, you'd be like a 5-star general at this point.
I grew up in Brooklyn. My family was working class factory workers, and it was a great childhood. And I was a gifted child in school and was very well supported in that. And coming out of high school, I knew that I wanted to go to college, and we didn't have the resources for that back then. And so I took a job to put myself through night school, which I will tell you about that job. And it turned out to be a startup division of a beauty company. And that sort of launched my career in beauty and wellness. And with that, I went to NYU Nights. I had limited exposure as a child, so what was I going to college for? I didn't want to be a doctor, and I certainly didn't know any lawyers. So it was a teacher, and so I started my education in university for teaching, and then with that first job, which was Germain Montet, which is an old beauty company from the 60s and 70s. Okay. And we were launching a startup division called Montage. And there were 3 of us, a VP of product development, a VP of sales, and me, and they were on the road all the time. And so I got a lot of exposure to the president and the exec VP, and I got promoted in 6 months to a product manager.
Congratulations.
Thank you. That line actually in the 70s was interchangeable shades, which was 30 years ahead of its time. Wow. And failed.
Well, failure, I've used this acronym a couple of times. Somebody told me it was the first attempt in learning is what fail means. So I was like, all right, that makes sense. I like that.
And look, 30 years later, it became a huge trend and was, it is wonderful and challenging to be a pioneer.
Right.
And I'll take the wonderful and challenging together all the time. But anyway, that sort of launched me into a career of startups in beauty and wellness. Initially, a lot of that was in the area of fragrance, Jeffrey Beam Gray Flannel, Ralph Lauren,
sure.
Lauren and Tuxedo and Polo. All of these were startups, but back then we didn't call them startups.
Right.
Calvin Klein, Obsession for Man Eternity.
But they started on the apparel side and then moved into the...
These were all licensing companies, right?
Got it,
We were all sort of small licensors of those fashion designers' names. It was sort of the era of designer fragrances in the 70s and early 80s.
Which is kind of now morphed into like the celebrity or the person. But back then it was affiliation with a brand.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
It was a lot of fashion designers back then. And then after a number of designer fragrances that were, set trends in the fragrance industry and broke records. I was one of the founders of a company called Griffin Development, and we were a joint venture with The Limited, with Les Wexner. And we put Les Wexner specialty stores which were Victoria's Secret, and then we created Bath and Body Works into personal care. And that may sound like a yawn today, but in the 90s we were the first, and that whole distribution channel didn't exist before that. And
I mean, Victoria's Secret, I think, was one of the best acquisitions of all time. I think it was like one store that the Limited acquired and turned it into what it is.
Yes,
today.
Absolutely.
So, seems like a no-brainer right now, but at the time it was like, hey,
exactly,
cutting edge.
Exactly. And so from there, I exited. Once the Limited bought us out, I sort of exited and started DeBaun Development, and that became a business development, concept development, product development company, mostly specializing in beauty and then evolving into wellness because all of it is sort of merging. And so people, my elevator pitch is DeBaun Development creates products, businesses, strategies, brands for people who don't know they need it yet, and for some who ask.
Gotcha.
That's basically.
Got it. So when you think about, maybe just take a new client as an example, and you go through, whether it's like an actual checklist, you go through a mental checklist of, when do I get a prototype done? When do I get a sample, focus group? When do I go and file trademarks? When do I go and get the packaging? Could you kind of talk us through how your brain works on this, which is now kind of just, routine to you, but from a standpoint of people coming in and saying, hey, I've got this new idea and it's on PowerPoint. I want to get it to a $100 million company. Let's get it to 5 first to make sure you've got something.
Right.
How do you think about that, and how do you assess, where a product potentially fits in the market, or who it displaces? So it's somewhat of an open-ended question, but just to say, what's the sequence or what's the logic behind each step, and where do you spend your money?
So, everything begins with an idea, with an inspiration and a concept, right? And then what you're asking me is, what are the steps to the manifestation or the successful manifestation of that concept in the market?
Right.
And what are the things that I look for in something like that, or how do I guide someone? And so, look, this has been not just today, but forever. Whether it's a concept or a venture together, an idea, a service, a product, at the end of the day, everyone wants to know the answer to one question, and that is, what's in it for me? Right? And so whether it's to a VC, what's in it for them, to a consumer, what's in it for them, to a retailer, what's in it to them, for a publisher, that's really the question that everyone is asking. That one has to answer. That's what a brand is answering with a product. Right. What's in it for the consumer? So that's sort of at the core of everything that I look at. And then I try to work with my startups, clients, millennials, VCs, whatever, to distill, to see what the assets are that are in the idea or in the brand, and to distill it into a value proposition overall. And then to find what is the best course of action to build awareness, penetration, and success for that benefit, right? And so if somebody has a concept, the first thing that I ask them is to look at what's in the environment, is there anything like it, who is this good for? Who is your target market? And I don't get into all of that traditional, you have to identify your target market by, demographics and psychographics and whatever. Who is this for, and why would they want it? And and then distilling what that proposition, they call it, unique selling proposition is to the customer, right? And if there isn't something that's obvious, then I start to look at synthesizing what's around in unique ways to create a value that may not be there and create a demand that may not be there, right? And then what are the steps after that? Writing a vision statement, a core vision statement that what are the assets, what are the benefits, who it's for. Then taking that and creating that into a larger, let's call it a deck, or, that goes through what the strategies are for developing that concept into something, and then what would be necessary. What's the distribution? Who are the partners? What's the execution? And going through all of that in a very disciplined way. You know, success is magic and discipline and a lot of hard work. And so that's sort of what I go through. One of the things that I think that is a unique skill for me is that I'm very discerning. I cut away, a lot of people call me the knife or the surgeon or whatever. I cut away all the excess and try to get to the core value of what's there. And then try to build from there and go through a very narrow hole. And then, you know, through that funnel, create something, a lot of light coming out of it.
Got it. That's great. I was just reading a book by Seth Godin, and he said, you know, a brand is a promise, and like that, you got to stand behind that promise. And if you deviate from that, you know, you basically have nothing. So when you look at a new company that comes to you, where they have, you know, a fair amount of friends and family capital, they've got a Series A round, and you kind of see in your market, it seems like there are very, very low barriers to entry because you've got a lot of co-packers and you've got a readily available amount of raw materials that are going into these ingredients. And I don't know, we used to like make potion as a kid. So it's like all these concoctions. And, you know, so how do you build a moat around one of these businesses?
That's a great question. So, number one, Seth is correct. A brand is a promise, and delivering on that promise. So right now we're referring to skincare, right, in particular. And in skincare, it's about articulating your point of difference, what that promise is, and delivering on it over and over again. And then building that relationship of trust with the consumer or the user that this is authentic and it delivers what you're saying. So if you're doing that well, if you've distilled your promise and well enough and in an exciting way to get somebody to try the product, if you are, so you know that they want your promise because they've bought it the first time. Right? They've bought into your promise. You must deliver on that promise. So, and not overpromise. So be very specific and articulate exactly what you're offering them, and then make sure you give it to them. If that happens, chances are you'll get repeat purchases. They will start referring it to other people, other friends and family, and then it starts virally. You know, we used to call it referral-based marketing. Now you can call it influencers. You can call it a banana. I don't care what you call it. But the best references come from other people and other users.
Got it. So when you look at a company and you say, okay, let's say they compete again, or there's Neutrogena as an example, as a similar type of, you know, organic skincare, you know, anti-aging cream. And you see a Neutrogena commercial, you know, at least every other night, you know, on cable. You know, how do you assess whether, you know, look, they're going to the masses and you're going to like a niche or you know, the classes or what have you? How do you kind of if you were like in a bumper pool game or something, like how do you kind of say like, okay, like that's like an 800-pound gorilla, so we're gonna like kind of stay out of their way, or we're gonna basically say, hey, look, you know, I see an opening there. Yeah, how do you think about that?
So I tend to look at the giants as the opportunities for acquisition, right?
To build a company for them to be interested.
Exactly,
right.
Because I feel that they are machines that are built to keep their brands going, right? They are not necessarily built to take risks on new concepts and new products, right? Even invention and innovation from an ingredient level, right? Or a service or whatever, they tend to buy into it later. I mean, there are many of these companies now that have launched, you know, development funds, very small accelerators and things like that to sort of, not as investments, but just to sort of keep their fingers on the pulse of what's happening out there, right? So I see them as the acquirers. Now, if Neutrogena, if there was no other opportunity in the market, Neutrogena would be selling to every single person, and that's not the case. And until a brand is selling to every single person on the planet,
Right.
that reflects an opportunity for someone else to come in and communicate in a way that resonates to someone else, even if they're buying Neutrogena.
That's interesting. Well, you make a good point about these companies as acquirers. And if we go back 20 years, like Coca-Cola, as an example, if we use the beverage market, which I know something about, not really about the skincare market, but Coca-Cola used to try and create these new brands, and none of them were authentic because they were coming out of, some room in Atlanta with, a couple of people in R&D. And I think at one point they basically said, look, we're trying to build all these brands and it's just not working, even in the beer industry. And they said, you know what, I'd rather overpay for an acquisition when somebody's actually made some traction than waste money on R&D when I'm not really coming up with anything that anyone really is interested in. So, you see like vitamin water, or you see, Body Armor, or some of these other drinks, and they have these eye-popping valuations. And, if you're doing the math internally at a Coke or a Pepsi, they're saying, well, look, we could have burned $100 million on R&D and have zero, or we'll just pay $200 million and we'll buy this company that has cash flow and shelf space. So it seems like the same thing that the skincare companies and the beer and the beer companies, they bought all these craft beer.
Yeah, and
groups.
And their growth and profit comes from more distribution,
Right.
broader, global, right? So it's not from the core strategy; it's from actually building out more distribution on a model that's already existing.
Right. So basically, to kind of sum it up, they're basically saying to all these entrepreneurs, like, when you have something that's of value, I'll overpay you for it, but I want 100 of you to basically take your own capital risk with your VC groups, and I'll take the top 10. And then I'm going to win because I'm going to make money from the distribution because the margins are so high and I've got the fixed distribution channel in place. So basically, we're basically building businesses to a point to get on their radar screen. And if you put them together properly, once you hit a certain revenue target, I don't know what that is in the skincare industry, maybe you can, like when do some of your clients get to a point where some of these bigger players start knocking on their door? Is it 5 million of revenue? Is it 10? Is it?
Yeah, it could be anywhere from 1 million when somebody sees something really innovative going out there and they want to jump on board, but it's typically 5 to 10, something like that. And again, there's lots of reasons. One of the companies and acquisitions that I talk about a lot is Lauder with Aveda. Years ago, right? When Lauder bought Aveda, which was, quote, a natural hair care line, for example. It's not like Lauder could not have done a natural hair care line. They had Origins, whether that was fully natural or not, and I don't want to get into that at the moment. But one of the things that Aveda brought to them that they didn't have was salon distribution. And because they got a new distribution channel, the amount that they paid, the multiple they paid was very, very high because they got a brand, but they also got an entirely new distribution channel, which was very appetizing for them. So there's lots of extra things that come into play. So it may be a new product. It may be a new consumer base. Like, it's really hot with millennials and they don't have a lot of product going to millennials. So whether or not they could have done that product already, this product is already, tracking with millennials and they want to get into that group and learn more. So there's lots of things that happen internally in those organizations that lead them to make those acquisitions. And some of them have to do with product, but a lot of them have to do with more than that.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it was a lot of our listeners are either working or participants in the health and fitness industry, and you see that Equinox made a strategic investment and then acquired all of SoulCycle, and that was basically a different channel to get new consumers or to even protect some of the consumers that are already at Equinox. And then when Rumble started getting a little bit of buzz, they said, okay, I'm going to go and take an equity stake in Rumble because I want Equinox to be known as like the authority on fitness and lifestyle. And if some of our consumers are going there, I want them to know whether, the Equinox team, had this in a meeting or not. I think in the back of their mind, they must be saying like, I don't want someone else to take up the mind share and I'm going to be able to say I own it, whether I own 5% of it or 50% or 100%. I own a piece of that,
Right.
and that's powerful.
They want
from their
part of that
standpoint.
customer,
Right.
and like, the big beauty companies, if somebody's buying another product from somewhere else, they want that customer. If they can afford to get that customer and have them buy that product, I mean, any one of these companies can create Schmidt's deodorant or
Right,
any
sure.
of these natural things, but they already are tracking. They have a customer base that they may want. They can get other things from that, and so it's much. And they also, by that time that they make that acquisition, it's metrics, right? It's equations. They know
Right.
what the equations are. The risk is minimized because of that. And again, they can add more distribution to it. And yes, they want that consumer. It's one of the reasons why, beauty companies have so many products. If sort of you're doing, eyeshadow really well, and your customer is going to leave you to go buy a fragrance or a mascara from somewhere else, you're going to offer them that mascara at the counter if you can. If it's
Right.
believable and it's on brand and whatever, you're going to offer it to them anyway.
So when someone comes to you and they have an idea, do you usually start with one SKU, or do you start with several? Do you feel like, how important is it to have a line, and how is it important to have a product? And then one thing that's come up in the past in conversations where someone's come up with a great idea, and it's like, okay, is that a product or is that a company? And there's like
Right.
a clear distinction, and also
Right.
like, what frustration are you solving? And you kind of touched on that before about, what's the brand promise, what's unique about it, the unique selling proposition is like, what frustration are you solving for me that some of these other products have not really addressed properly? So how do you think about that without an entrepreneur getting to the point where like, oh, I came and talked to you about like this one, organic skincare product. Now you're saying I should have like a line of 20 different anti-aging and wrinkle and, night cream and day cream and
Right.
coffee cream or whatever else.
So sometimes I create products and brands that launch companies, and sometimes I create companies that launch products and brands.
Gotcha.
And it can go both ways. So sometimes a product is a company, right? It can be a unique product that launches an entire company, right? And that happens often, and that's great when it does happen. Sometimes, and there are products that can stand alone. For instance, I'll give you an example, just sort of because we're talking about skincare, a nutraceutical for anti-aging. Right? A nutraceutical for anti-aging can launch alone, and it can launch a company. And then you can build topical products, or they have done that. And then you can build topical products to add to that regimen if you want, something like that. But that sort of was a new form, let's just say 10 years ago. It's not as much today as it was back then, but a product, a company can be launched from something like that.
Gotcha.
Or somebody, I don't remember the Venom, I think it was, with the lip plumper.
Oh, okay.
Again, 10, 20 years ago, there was this very exciting peppery lip plumper.
Yeah, I never use it.
And it worked, and it sort of broke through, and it launched a company. So, and then once that happens, someone like that might, back then, this was before social media, may have gone to QVC. And then once QVC starts to build awareness with that customer base, you want to feed them more from the brand, whatever.
Gotcha.
So I like to be as streamlined. I told you this, like I'm the knife, the surgeon,
Right.
I cut away. If something doesn't need to be flanked by other products to deliver on the promise or to articulate a point of difference, then it's not necessary. Is it necessary to communicate something that's more and different? And sometimes it could be the same as what someone else is offering, but you're communicating it in a way that is appetizing to someone else that's not buying it already.
Got it. Before we finish up here, I just want you to maybe help clarify either a myth or a truth. Every time I see a skincare line or I see some kind of sea salt or whatever, someone's told me in the past, or I've picked up that that's like an 80 or 90% gross margin on these products. So the question is, one, is that true? Two, is it true, but there's so much in the selling costs and the distribution costs that you can't really look at that as like the actual number of what the potential profitability is.
Right.
Or three is, are the products that much, like I usually look at a cost of goods sold. If the gross margin on a product is so high, then it's, like it has so much like engineering or like value add or patent to it. And in this industry, it seems like a lot of these products don't really cost that much to actually put it in a bottle. So maybe you can share some of that without giving away the secret sauce of the whole industry and then somehow the stocks drop of all these big cosmetic companies.
So the actual formulation itself inside a skincare product may not be. So to answer the first question, the cost of goods is low considering the retail price of a skincare product. It's one of the most favorable categories, even in beauty, right? It has better cost of goods typically than fragrance might, and or color cosmetics would. And part of that has to do with the packaging. Sometimes the packaging for skincare is much simpler than fragrance, which would have a lot of custom tooling and gold plating and maybe moving parts, et cetera, et cetera. But in general, beauty and skincare have low cost of goods and very favorable margins. There is probably more spent in packaging than food, for instance, or beverage or something like that. And so you sort of add into that. And there's a lot spent on marketing to communicate the beauty of it. What I'm using, it's funny, right? I don't mean to be funny, but what is the beauty of this? Does it feel beautiful? Does it look beautiful? What is the experience of it? And what are you getting from it? Typically, you would not launch a product in beauty or in skincare and not plan if you had the budgets. And I'm not talking about a maker, at home doing it organically and growing. But if you're really raising the money to launch a company and want to have all of your resources, you would probably plan at least 30% of your sales to be spent in marketing the first year, maybe even 40, right?
Gotcha.
Something like that. With social media and Facebook ads and all of the above, the sort of algorithms and equations are very sophisticated, so that could be a lot more efficient than it was when you were buying print ads 20 years ago.
Gotcha. Maybe the thing to tell consumers when they say, "Oh, the price of this is so high," it's like, "Well, you have to pay me to educate you on what you're buying." Maybe that's the way to say it. Like you're paying for an education. It's cost you $5 for me to tell you like what's going to happen to you.
You're also paying for a lot of R&D.
Right.
Right. I mean, so some of these
almost like a drug company,
exactly.
in a way,
so
like a drug
of,
discovery business.
Right. It takes, even for a skincare, product, it takes years to get the formulation correct and balanced, and there's stability testing and compatibility testing and human testing, and there may be patents, there are development costs, and so the actual cost of the product is after all of those development costs, all of the years of figuring out how to get the formulation right, how to get it packaged in a way that is consistent with the promise that you're offering, and then all of the branding and all of the experts and the people that help you communicate it in a way that the ultimate consumer sees the benefit and the value.
That's great.
And break through.
Sure. There's definitely a lot of noise. It's not easy to market new products. It looks easy because you've got no barriers to entry, but you've also got big barriers to audience reach. Well, Denise, thank you for coming on, giving us a quick education on the skincare industry. If you need a knife, please go to DeBaun Development. Ms. Knife is here. We've worked with her. She's got our Halo stamp of approval, and we look forward to working with you in the future.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.